It's great news for Auburn recruiting to get five-star linebacker Owen Pappoe, a guy that's been on the story for a long time, including very adamant on the record that Pappoe is going to choose Auburn really a couple of weeks ago. It's Benjamin Wolk here on this special broadcast of SEC Country Live. Ben, I'll say thanks to you for being with us here this evening. Let me start with this. You were confident that Pappoe was choosing Auburn a couple of weeks ago. Was there a point over the last couple of weeks in which it wavered at all, or was this steadfast the entire time?
You know, I think that this was he's been trending this way for a while now. I mean, he just said shortly after making his announcement that really 2 months ago he made a visit to Auburn. And I think that was shortly after when I spoke with him, and he said that Georgia was still his number one, but that Auburn has clearly come up as his number two. I think it was around that time where he really started shifting toward Auburn. You know, he's made several visits to Auburn that have gone unreported. You know, it's quite clear that Travis Williams really knocked this one out of the park.
Ben, I think you made a great point in your piece today, talking about how long Auburn had been recruiting, a guy like Owen Pappoe. How big of a deal was that to him, or did that have anything to do with it at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's been a guy that's been obviously on the circuit for really as long as anyone in this 2019 class getting recruited. Auburn wasn't always at the forefront of the conversation, but they always hung around. And I think that Travis Williams and Kevin Steele finally getting some consistency there. And you've got to think, early on in Owen Pappoe's high school career, Auburn was changing defensive coordinators every single year. And so for them to finally get some consistency on the defensive side of the ball, it didn't hurt that right after him releasing his top three at the end of last year, he was at the Georgia-Auburn game and the Alabama-Auburn game, and obviously those environments are going to catch your interest a little bit. And so, I think that Auburn used those two opportunities to really then turn it around and land his commitment today.
You mentioned the relationship with Travis Williams. We obviously understand how instrumental that was. What else about Auburn sold Pappoe?
I think that if you look at, I know that it's one of those things for a long time. Everyone just assumed it was going to be Georgia, and it was hard to find reasons for why it wouldn't be Georgia. And outside of Travis Williams, I think that there's really two things to point to. One, Auburn has 3 graduating linebackers, seniors, that will be leaving after this year. I think that Owen has a legitimate opportunity to step in and play day one at Auburn. And then on top of that, Grayson is really close to Athens, and I think that a lot of people thought that the staying home factor was something that would help Georgia in a big way. But there are some guys that do like to, step out of their comfort zone, maybe go a little bit away from home. And even though Auburn's not super far from home, it does maybe provide them a little bit of extra distance, more so than Athens would. I think that those are really that and then Travis Williams. Those are the 3 main factors for why Owen ultimately chose Auburn.
Ben, you mentioned today in your piece that this might have been the biggest recruiting story that you've covered in the last 3 years covering Auburn. How big of a deal is this for Gus Malzahn? I've made the point that this is a absolutely huge deal for Auburn, not just because of how good Owen Pappoe is, but where they got him from. How big is this for Gus Malzahn?
There's no doubt about it. Like you mentioned, since I've been covering Auburn, they haven't had a single 5-star commit to the program. They've had a guy that ended up, T.D. Moultrie, that ended up rising up to a 5-star. But it's been a while since they've got a guy of this high caliber. But more so than that, this is a guy who has been one of Georgia's top targets for a long time. In the 2018 cycle, Auburn just didn't win any of these battles against Georgia. Georgia really won every single one of them. And I think that Auburn made a point. They recognized Owen Pappoe as a guy that they could get in on and a guy that would make some shockwaves around the state of Georgia. And I think that this was critical for Auburn to really change the narrative that was set last year because, at this time, all throughout last year, really, Auburn was taking loss after loss to Georgia on the recruiting trail, and they needed to change that narrative in a big way, and obviously this helped do that.
Ben, you cover Auburn recruiting, but you're obviously aware plenty of Georgia fans are tuned in watching right now. So from their perspective, did Georgia mishandle this recruitment? You mentioned the geographic closeness for Pappoe, just down the road from Athens, a guy that, was thought to be a Georgia lean for a long time before maybe the last month here. Did Georgia stub its toe on the way to the finish line with Pappoe, or is this all for Auburn's credit?
I think that Auburn did a really stand-up job here. I don't think Georgia did anything wrong. I think that Georgia would have been a great choice. I think that they had a lot of things going in their favor for Owen Pappoe, but I just think that Auburn sort of snuck in there, and Auburn, no one was really expecting them to do anything in this one, and Travis Williams, he played a key role, and he really handled this recruitment. I think it helped Auburn that Travis Williams is the Gwinnett County area recruiter, and he's also the linebackers coach. And so that's why they were able to sort of have a guy that was in on the Grayson guys early on, but also is going to coach Owen Pappoe at the next level. And so I think that this is a credit to what Auburn was able to do because, 3 months ago, I don't really think that anybody would have expected this to be the choice.
So we'll add this to some recent wins for Auburn recruiting. Ja'Kai Clark, the 3-star center teammate of Owen Pappoe that joined Auburn not too long ago. Jalen Simpson this week, the 4-star safety from Frederick Academy down in coastal Georgia. The assumption here is his teammate, Jashawn Sheffield, and a 4-star athlete, might be on his way to Auburn too. What else could be upcoming next for Auburn recruiting here?
I think that, like you mentioned, Jashawn Sheffield he's holding out. I think that you could maybe see him make a commitment at some time this week. Auburn's still in the market for a couple of grad transfer defensive backs who are closing in on some decisions, and that news could come here in the near future. But, I think that this was a date that Auburn had circled on the calendar for a while and was waiting for it to happen so that they could see what happened with Owen Pappoe, because he's a guy that you want to build your class around. I think that's exactly what they plan to do.
Benjamin Wolk, thanks for your time. We'll look forward to reading plenty more from you. Auburn recruiting coverage there at SECCountry.com. You were all over this story. You were on it very early, and we appreciate your expertise here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon.